medical establishment don't like GcMaf because it works, so we have to. I don't know, but I don't think there's anything illegal, but they just don't like it. Yeah, the GcMaf has come down in price, actually. Okay. It's been halved in the last 6 months. Sure. They send it in a flask, and then it's in a vial, and the flask has got some freezing units in it. We've had 5 people that we've been in touch with, and I've never heard of any side effects.
So you've had sort of 5 patients that you've helped with?
Well, I'm sorry to say they were very late and 2 have died. I'm not going to... But my point was that there was no side effects from the MAF. Okay. And those 2, one was a very elderly lady and she couldn't keep up. And she didn't want the injection. She had the ointment you rub in, and I don't think that's the way to go. And you need to spend more.
Qualifications, no, I didn't go to medical school.
You're not a doctor?
No, I'm not a doctor.
Why would anyone trust Amanda Mary, someone to treat them for cancer who is not a qualified doctor?
Because we get results. People actually walk out of here alive. When the medical industry in the UK have failed, completely failed, but somebody has actually had the energy to live through the chemotherapy, when they're told, I'm sorry, there's nothing more that we can do, when they've exhausted every single avenue possible to them, they then come to me.
BBC 5 Live. 5 Live investigates.
Good morning and welcome to 5 Live Investigates. Today, the unlicensed and scientifically unproven treatment being sold illegally as a possible cure for cancer. A year-long investigation by this programme has found that desperate patients, some of them terminally ill, are being offered a blood product called GcMaf for hundreds of pounds. This week, we handed a file to the MHRA, the government's medicines regulator, who've now started their own investigation. It follows revelations by this programme a year ago, which exposed one supply chain for the drug online. Today, however, we've uncovered another, this time through a health food shop on a normal suburban high street. So what exactly is GcMaf? Well, we're joined now by Dr. Kat Arney, the presenter of the 5 Live Science programme. She has studied GcMaf. So, Kat, good morning to you. Just explain to us what GcMaf is and the idea behind it as a possible cure for cancer.
Well, what it comes down to is the immune system. And we know there's been a lot of interest in the immune system for fighting cancer in recent years because cancer is something that starts in the body. It starts from our own cells going wrong and it hides from the immune system. It doesn't see it and attack it as it would with a disease like a virus or a bacteria. So there's a lot of interest in finding things that can wake up the immune system, make them recognise cancer cells and get rid of them. And there's been a huge amount of research into this and we're starting to see some really exciting new treatments becoming available. Now, GcMaf, the story starts over a decade ago with some researchers in Japan who've kind of been looking at other molecules that might stimulate the immune system. And it's important to stress that although there's a lot of research going on into immunotherapy, into the immune system in cancer, this work on GcMaf is really a very tiny bit and doesn't seem to have been picked up by many other groups, which suggests that it's not actually really that good. And the whole idea is that there's this molecule called GcMaf. It's short for GC macrophage activating factor. It's meant to be produced in the body, and it's meant to be produced in a way that stimulates some immune cells called macrophages to find cancer cells and attack them. Now, the idea is that cancer cells make a molecule that shuts off the GcMaf. So if you give cancer patients GcMaf, it will kind of override this, activate the macrophages and get rid of the cancer. I mean, that's the idea.
That's the idea. So what is the hard scientific evidence behind it?
The problem is it really doesn't look that good. And there's been a very small number of papers published looking at the science behind it. And for example, there's one paper that shows that if you inject mice with tumours into it, they will live from 16 days up to 35 days. This isn't curing cancer. This is maybe slowing it down. There are problems with the research. And it has been tested in some patients, and the people who are proponents of GcMaf will show you these papers and say, look, we've tried it in patients, this is amazing, it cures them all. And there are very big problems with those papers, scientifically speaking. A large number of them have been retracted. That means they've been taken out of the journals that they were published in because of problems with the kind of patients that they looked at. All the patients that they've looked at have been treated with other conventional treatments. They're using endpoints. They're looking at the ways that patients get better in very non-standard ways. They're looking at the levels of a particular molecule that no other doctors around the world look at. And they're not actually looking at the growth of tumours in these patients.
So if you were to put into layman's terms then the evidence for GcMaf as a potential cure for cancer, what would you say?
I'd say it's paltry at best.
Kat Arney, we'll come back to you a little later, Dr. Kat Arney. Now, our investigation into the sale of GcMaf began when we had a tip-off telling us it was available through a shop called Earth Foods in Bournemouth. Our undercover reporter, Ruth Evans, was referred to a man who works there called Nick Greenwood. Ruth told him that her mother-in-law had been diagnosed with breast cancer for a second time and was too ill to travel to the shop herself, but that she had read about GcMaf online. Mr. Greenwood explained to Ruth how GcMaf works and why the medical establishment, in his view, doesn't like it.
The medical establishment don't like GcMaf because it works, so we have to... I don't think there's anything illegal, but they just don't like it because it works and they can't do their pharmaceutical stuff. I expect you know all about that. What the immune system does is produce a macrophage, like a Pac-Man, that goes like that. The macrophage is produced by a glycoprotein, which is glycoprotein macrophage activating factor, and it's a D base, so you need a lot of vitamin D. So the macrophage comes from the D binding protein, and that activates the macrophage, and then it goes and just gobbles it all up. So if you just bear in mind that the cancer cell is destroying the part of the immune system that is killing the cancer. That's the part really to remember. I've just you don't. The rest is hard to remember and need to anyway.
As long as it works.
Yeah, well, it works, but does it work enough to cure somebody? Yes, sometimes, no, other times. What I can say is it's one of the best ways to try and tackle it.
Would there be any kind of side effects from it that she'd have to be wary of?
Of GcMaf, no.
Because that was another question that she had. She's been looking online but hasn't been able to actually speak to anyone who's taken it directly.
Well, we've had 5 people that we've been in touch with, and I've never heard of any side effects.
Well, that's really encouraging. So you've had sort of 5 patients that you've helped with.
Well, I'm sorry to say they were very late and 2 have died. I'm not going to, but my point was that there was no side effects from the MAF.
Okay.
And those 2, one was a very elderly lady and she couldn't keep up, and she didn't want the injection. She had the ointment you rub in, and I don't think that's the way to go, and you need to spend more. And the other lady I know wasn't keeping it up because she didn't reorder at the right time.
So that was Nick Greenwood telling our undercover reporter Ruth Evans about the benefits of taking the unlicensed medicine GcMaf. Dr. Kat Arney, what do you make of what you've just heard?
I think as soon as you hear the phrase, oh, it's the medical establishment, they don't want to be able to treat you, I find it infuriating because I've worked in medical research for a long time, and doctors want to treat people. This whole idea makes no sense at all, that someone would find a treatment that's effective and then, oh no, let's lock it in a cupboard and squirrel it away so no one can have it. Anyone who knows doctors, who knows doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals who work in cancer, we've all lost people to cancer. This idea that we don't want treatments is absolute, profound and offensive nonsense.
And a clear implication in that conversation that 2 women who had taken GcMaf had died either because they weren't taking GcMaf correctly or maybe they weren't taking enough of it.
Exactly. And, when his phrase, I think he says, it works, but does it work enough to cure someone? We don't really know. And honestly, when people hear about these treatments, you have to ask yourself, would you take a treatment, say, from a pharmaceutical company that was at that level of proof? You have to ask yourself, why do drugs cost so much? Because they've been tested. We know they work. They have to go through all sorts of regulatory hurdles to prove that they're safe and know how effective they are. And of course, no one's saying every cancer treatment works 100% of the time. It's brilliant. No one says that. But we know how well they work. We know what the side effects are. We know the doses because they've been tested. When he says, 5 people have taken it, sadly 2 have died because they did something wrong, really, you have to ask yourself, would you, yourself, or one of your family members, would you subject them to injecting a treatment that's a blood product where you have no idea where it's been made or if it's been safe, and at that level of scientific proof? I think you have to ask yourself questions.
Kat, you referenced there, if you like, conventional treatments for cancer. In a follow-up telephone conversation, Nick Greenwood advised our undercover reporter against chemotherapy.
I'm not a doctor, but I am a naturopath. And I go on understanding how the GcMaf works and understanding how other treatments work. And this, from my experience, this does seem the best way to go. I mean, what other way is there to go? I mean, I definitely don't recommend chemotherapy. And no, there's nobody in the natural world of medicine that does.
There you go. What do you make of that, Dr. Kat Arney, against chemotherapy?
I'm not a doctor, but let me tell you what to do. I think that is...
That's what he said, not what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I'm also not a medical doctor, but I will say that I think it's scandalous when people offer that advice. Chemotherapy is not the only way we treat cancer, and there are other new treatments that are coming through, things like immunotherapies. The other thing that it's really important to say is that although we're now very good at treating many sorts of cancers, I think about half of all people will survive cancer for at least 10 years now, and yet we can't treat everyone. The risk is that if you turn away from your doctors, you say, I don't want any of this, that people will miss out on even palliative treatments or treatments which could include chemotherapy, could include radiotherapy, could include surgery, that could really benefit their quality of life, give them more time at the end and give them better time and time to spend with their families, rather than saying, take this treatment, go all over the place, do this protocol, wind yourself down, rather than seeking medical treatments that we know could bring them benefits.
We are talking about a treatment as well that Mr. Greenwood told us would cost £600 a month for 6 to 12 months, that the product would be provided by his supplier in Mexico. Now, we did write to Mr. Greenwood asking him why he was selling an unlicensed and potentially unsafe drug as a possible cure for cancer. He didn't answer our questions, so we paid him a visit. So this is Southbourne in Bournemouth, a very pleasant suburb not far from the sea. There are coffee shops, there's a couple of funky clothes shops. This is the ordinary parade of shops where our reporter came just a few weeks ago and was offered GcMaf by Nick Greenwood. The shop where he works is just down here, so he's refused our request for an interview so far. I'm going to see him face to face and asking some tough questions about his sale of GcMaf. Hello, Mr. Greenwood. It's Adrian Goldberg here from the BBC, from 5 Live Investigates. I'm just trying to ask you about why you're selling GcMaf when it's unlicensed in this country, Mr. Greenwood. You're selling it to vulnerable people for hundreds of pounds, Mr. Greenwood. Mr. Greenwood has shut the door on me. He's just told us he's not the owner of the premises, but we have got evidence of him selling GcMaf. Now, this week we passed a file on to the government's Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, the MHRA. They're responsible for making sure all medicines in the UK work and that they are acceptably safe. Let's speak now to Mark Burse, who's from the MHRA's Inspectorate. Morning to you, Mark.
Good morning, Andrew.
What do you make of what you've heard?
Well, GcMaf's an unlicensed product, and we have no idea what it may contain or the conditions in which it was produced. And as was mentioned earlier, it comes from a blood product as a starting material, and that on itself carries its own risks. So, I mean, clearly for a medicine to get a licence, it needs to undergo rigorous testing in clinical trials, and then there's a robust assessment process of that data before it's being licensed for use.
So if somebody's listening to this and was considering buying GcMaf, you talk about it being a blood product, you talk about the fact that it's unlicensed. In practical terms, what does that mean in terms of the risks they may be taking?
Well, the risks are that, as I say, there's no assessment that's been undertaken of that, and that poses a huge risk to them as a patient. And we would urge anybody with any type of condition as this to seek a medical professional advice and take their advice on what treatment's best for them.
And I'm guessing then when you talk about the supply chain, you would mean that you don't know how it's manufactured,
Sure.
You don't know where it's being supplied from, you don't know how it's being stored, which presumably, potentially, could have a devastating impact on your health if those things are not being done correctly.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the primary purpose of the team we have, is to go out and make those assessments within licensed products to make sure that they are manufactured safely, they are distributed safely, and people can source medicines that are safe for them.
So it meets none of your criteria because
Absolutely
it is unlicensed for manufacture, for supply, for storage, and it is a blood product which has its own particular risk factors.
Absolutely.
OK, Mark, we'll speak to you in a little while again. Love to hear your reaction to what you're hearing this morning. Have you been offered GcMaf or another product as a cure for cancer? Would you consider injecting yourself with an unlicensed medicine? You can text us on 85058, on social media at BBC 5 Live, or email goldberg@bbc.co.uk. It's now 11:21.
Across the UK.
This is BBC 5 Live. 5 Live investigates.
Today on 5 Live investigates the cancer patients paying hundreds of pounds for an unproven and potentially unsafe medicine which it's claimed could cure their condition. It's a blood product called GcMaf that patients inject themselves. There's no credible evidence to suggest it works, and it hasn't been approved by the UK medical authorities. That's why it's illegal to sell it as a treatment. Yet when our reporter Ruth Evans went undercover to meet Nick Greenwood, who works at Earth Foods in Bournemouth, she was offered a course of GcMaf at a cost of £600 a month. Lots of comments coming in on this already. Aaron Scott says people selling this rubbish, I'm being polite there, with his words, need locking up. Snake oil sold by heartless charlatans. Phil says, my wife died stupidly young from leukemia. We could have tried any drug, homeopathic or not, to give Sue a chance of prolonged life for a few £100 a month. Phil, thank you. Drop us a text to 85058 or on social media, we're at BBC 5 Live. Now, during the course of our investigation, it quickly became clear that Nick Greenwood was the middleman, and we were put in touch with his supplier, a British woman in Mexico called Amanda Mary Jewell. She sent our reporter a copy of the treatment plan, or as she called it, a protocol. And I've got a copy of it here. Dr. Kate Arney is with us, 5 Live science presenter. Kat, what do you make of this protocol?
Yeah, it's very interesting that when you're talking about these kind of approaches, people talk about this is a protocol, these are drugs, these are treatments.
Sounds very medical, doesn't it?
It does sound very medical, and it's something that I've really noticed in dealing with people. I've spent a lot of time looking at the alternative medicine, alternative treatments for cancer, and they do like to use the trappings of science and say, oh, look, here's this protocol, here's some scientific papers. But I'm afraid I'm looking through it now, this is just basically, it's a cornucopia of quackery. We've got things like taking curcumin. Yes, curcumin is being investigated in clinical trials, but we don't know how well it works. We don't know what cancers it works for. It's only being investigated in a trial for bowel cancer at the moment. Apricot kernels. This is a classic alternative medicine for cancer. It's called sometimes vitamin B17 or late trial. The idea is you take these apricot kernels and they turn into cyanide. They are actually toxic, and it's very dangerous for people to be taking them.
So this protocol actually could endanger your health.
It certainly could endanger your health, and there's certainly nothing here that I can see that will particularly help it. We've got something called Essiac tea, which is a herbal concoction. There's no evidence it works. Lots and lots of vitamins.
So these are all other
sorts of
supplements
things
to be taken in conjunction with the GcMaf. In terms of the GcMaf itself, Amanda Mary Jewell offers to provide a spray, which she says bypasses the Nagelese blockage, reactivates the macrophage's cancer-killing response.
I would love to see the evidence. You've got your head in your hands. You can see me. I would love to see the evidence. You know, I've seen one of the emails where she says we're getting amazing results. We're curing 100% of people with brain cancer. I mean, honestly, I could give you a vial of a spray. I could make a website saying it works. You have no evidence, no solid evidence that this stuff works. And once you look at the list of stuff, it's all, I sell this for this much money, I sell this for this much money. It starts to add up. And then as well, you can start to blame people. As we heard earlier, the man said, oh, the woman didn't buy enough, she didn't take it right, she didn't do the right thing. This is a very, very difficult thing you're asking people to do. It's an expensive and complicated thing you're asking them to do. So, of course, when they don't get better, you just point the finger and go, oh, well, see, they didn't do it right. They couldn't do it right. They didn't take it at the right time, rather than providing evidence that your treatment actually works.
Dr. Kat Arney, thank you. We have been doing our homework on Amanda Mary Jewell. We found this isn't the first time she's been investigated for selling an unlicensed medicine as some kind of miracle cure. Last year, Police and Trading Standards investigated her for the supply of something called MMS, which she claimed could cure autism. MMS is actually sodium chloride, a form of bleach. Buckinghamshire and Surrey Trading Standards, which is where Ms Jewell was operating from at the time, said they had serious concerns that vulnerable people were being misled. The investigation didn't get very far, though. She left the UK and, as we know, now offers treatments online and through the clinic in Mexico. The same clinic recommended to our undercover reporter in a health food shop in Bournemouth. Now, we managed to get an interview with Amanda Mary Jewell. We spoke to her on Skype from the clinic outside Puebla in Mexico. I started by asking her what evidence she had that GcMaf actually works.
We've got 22 years of scientific research behind GcMaf. It's not snake oil. There's 22 years of medical research.
We've spoken to one top cancer research specialist here in the UK who told us that the research has either been retracted or is scientifically dubious.
You see, cancer research in the UK has been going for many, many years, and they try and do a good job. But sadly, they come up with the same old chemotherapy, radiation and surgery.
There will be many thousands of people in the UK, a fair number of them, I'm sure, listening to this programme, whose lives have been saved or extended as a result of using chemotherapy or radiotherapy.
So the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm and never give a poison. Now, every one of your specialists in the UK signed that. Chemotherapy is mustard gas. Please check this. This is 100% correct. Now, it does have its cures. It's 3%.
Are you seriously questioning that thousands of people have had their lives saved or extended by chemotherapy or radiotherapy?
And those hundreds of thousands of people, although they may survive it, what you have to ask yourself is what quality of life they've had with chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is a ferocious chemistry, it really is. It's ferocious what it does.
And are you currently selling GcMaf in the UK?
No, I live in Mexico.
Although we have got evidence that you are supplying GcMaf in the UK.
If someone asks me in the UK, anyone in the world, I will definitely help them to purchase GcMaf.
And if somebody in the UK asked you, Amanda Mary, to supply them with GcMaf, you would do that then?
I would definitely send them the link to where to purchase it from, yes.
You say that you are a senior cancer researcher. What qualifications do you have to call yourself that?
I've got nearly 2 years of going to check so many different trials. Qualifications, no, I didn't go to medical school.
You're not a doctor?
No, I'm not a doctor.
Do you have any medical training whatsoever?
Yes, I do.
What's that medical training? What medical training do you have?
I did a 2-year course in autopsies in coronary. That's where I learned a lot more about cancer. I've done the past 15 years working with oncologists, and I'm still working. I work with the medical profession here. We work with neurosurgeons, we work with biochemists. We're not using snake oil here.
Why would anyone trust someone to treat them for cancer who is not a qualified doctor?
Because we get results. People actually walk out of here alive. When the medical industry in the UK have failed, when they're told, I'm sorry, there's nothing more that we can do, when they've exhausted every single avenue possible to them, they then come to me.
But you're not a doctor.
No.
Aren't you just exploiting the hopes of desperate, vulnerable people?
Absolutely not. I work with oncologists here. I work with MDs. I work with neurosurgeons that were trained in Europe. I am just a volunteer. I'm not a qualified doctor. I'm working with a product that has 100% scientific fact behind it and does no harm, unlike chemotherapy.
So there you go. That's Amanda Mary Jewell, now in Mexico, by her own admission, not a qualified doctor, nevertheless saying that GcMaf has 100% scientific fact behind it and can help cure cancer. So just how credible is that claim? A question for Peter Johnson, Professor of Oncology and Chief Clinician at Cancer Research UK.
I'm afraid for me it's just not credible at all. Our scientists at Cancer Research UK spend a huge amount of time and effort trying to understand the precise molecular processes by which the immune system recognises cancer, and it's massively complex. And what you're given here is a very superficial, it's really somebody waving their arms but saying the words, rather than any convincing explanation about what it really does.
Amanda Mary Jewell has told us that GcMaf has been 100% successful when prescribed by her in treating brain tumours. What do you make of that claim?
In theory, that sounds great, but we've seen absolutely no evidence to corroborate that. There are no published papers. The papers that have been published about GcMaf are scientifically extremely dubious, and several of them have been retracted after publication because of doubts about the evidence that they presented, and I'm afraid we can find nothing about brain tumours at all.
The price quoted to us for a course of GcMaf is £600 a month. What do you think's going on here?
I do have great concerns about people offering completely unproven treatments in return for money. It seems to me to be a very dubious practice. These are very vulnerable people with horrible illnesses who need all the help that they can get, and they need that help on the basis of sound, scientifically based, rational advice, not smoke and mirrors and not snake oil. The good thing about having the wonderful NHS that we have is that you can get the treatment you need for free when you need it. You don't have to pay some snake oil salesman £600 a month.
Our reporter was also advised against using chemotherapy.
I think that's quite a dangerous place to go for somebody who doesn't really understand cancer and its treatment. We have treated and cured many hundreds of thousands of people over the years with a variety of types of cancer using chemotherapy. Now, chemotherapy doesn't cure everybody with cancer, and we readily acknowledge that, but a lot of people with things like breast cancer, testicular cancer, leukemias in childhood, lymphomas have undoubtedly been cured. And there's a lot more people who've had benefit in terms of prolonging their life and improving their symptoms from chemotherapy. So for somebody who doesn't really understand it and hasn't really been involved with doing it, to simply say you shouldn't take chemotherapy just strikes me as irresponsible.
That's Peter Johnson from Cancer Research UK, getting lots of reaction this morning. You can text us on 85058 or on Twitter. We're at BBC 5 Live. Investigates today the unlicensed and scientifically unproven treatment being sold illegally for hundreds of pounds as a possible cure for cancer. We're talking about GcMaf, a product made from blood that you inject into your own body. Some claim it is a kind of miracle cure for HIV, autism, and yes, even cancer. But it is completely unregulated. There's no credible evidence it works, and selling it as a treatment in the UK is illegal. Despite that, we found GcMaf available at a shop on a British high street. Getting lots of comments on this. Bob says you have to remember that when people are seriously ill, they'll go to any length for a cure they wouldn't normally take. Chris in Brighton says, my friend is suffering with cancer at the moment and he's buying alternative treatments. I can just hear him saying when I tell him about your programme that it is a conspiracy by the medical companies. Tim, though, in response to Amanda Mary Jewell, who is offered to supply GcMaf from Mexico, we need far stronger legislation and custodial sentences for those promoting and selling. Extradite this woman. Gail says, I'm listening to your show. This is not the GcMaf I have. You cannot buy it here. Yes, it works. I'm living proof of this. And another texter saying, a friend of mine wasted thousands on natural remedies for breast cancer instead of having effective treatment. She died, I live. How dare these charlatans undermine faith in real scientific inquiry with their pseudo-scientific claptrap. Grr. That's from Dr. Teresa Ainan in Lincolnshire. Keep your comments coming. Drop us a text to 85058 or on Twitter, we're at BBC5Live. What about the people who GcMaf is targeted at? Well, Fiona O'Leary is an autism campaigner based in Ireland. She is on the autistic spectrum herself and is the mum of 2 children with autism. She has been campaigning against people like Amanda Mary Jewell, a British woman now based in Mexico who offered to sell us GcMaf. Fiona is particularly concerned by what she reads online in various groups and forums.
There are people that have bought these products that have passed away. There's actually 3 people I know of in this year that were in her groups that are now dead. I witnessed an Irish woman. She had terminal cancer. She was very, very ill. And I saw that woman walk away from professional care and buy her products. And she sadly died of April this year.
Of course, these are people who are already seriously ill, and we have no evidence to suggest that the GcMaf has done anything to kill them or to accelerate their condition.
You're right, we don't know how these people died, but the reality is they are vulnerable and that money could have been spent with their family. Amanda tells these people to walk away from their professional care, not to go to their doctor, and not to have chemotherapy. She calls it mustard gas because it's big pharma, it's the establishment, they're all out to get you whatever. This is what she tells these people. So they're not getting any advice from their doctor anymore. Instead, they're getting medical advice from this woman with no medical background whatsoever. And that's the real worry here. They're buying these products that they don't even know what's in these products. This is the reality, that these vials that people are buying, what's in them? We don't know what's in them. GcMaf is administered by intramuscular injection into the thigh, and it's a blood product. You know, we don't know if it's tested. We don't know where the blood source is coming from. Nobody knows what's in those vials, and these people are handing over so much money. And you must remember they're vulnerable, and many of these people are desperate because they've been given a life sentence. And I think that's really, really sad, is that they're given false hope. And it is a false hope because none of it is proven, none of it is regulated. And it's just a crime in my eyes. It's heartbreaking to watch this happen.
You've contacted the medicines regulator, the MHRA in the UK, and trading standards. How would you compare the response of the authorities in the UK to those in Ireland, where you're based?
I think Ireland is a lot better. In England, they don't seem to be addressing it at all. They're not implementing the laws that are, existing. And this woman is allowed to get away with this activity and go unscathed. And I believe that she should be brought back to the UK and investigated properly. And I think that the authorities can do that, and they're not doing that. And I don't know why. I just cannot believe that after 2 years, Adrian, that all the calls, all the emails that we have made to the authorities so many times, that this is still continuing. They are paid to protect vulnerable people. And I suppose my point is, why aren't the MHRA and trading standards looking for people like Amanda? It seems to be the case that we have to ring up with the complaints and they don't know about it. How come normal people or ordinary people like myself are finding out this information when they're paid to investigate people like her? They have to keep being prompted or poked to look at this issue. Without us, I don't think they'd be looking at all. And that's the reality.
That's Fiona O'Leary. Now, Mark Burrs from the Inspectorate of the Government's Medicines Regulator, the MHRA, is still with us. Mark, welcome back. So Fiona O'Leary saying that you only take action when prompted. Is that a fair accusation?
No, I wouldn't say it is. I mean, our primary purpose is for public safety. And maybe if I talk about quickly on this case first of all. So we have visited this particular shop.
So you have been to visit Nick Greenwood?
We
in
have
Bournemouth,
now.
yeah?
We've issued him with a warning, and we take it extremely seriously. And
so
any
you visited him.
supply,
When did you visit him?
we went there on Friday.
Okay, so you've issued him with a warning. Is that the end of it?
No, I mean that's as our primary purpose being public safety, and in this case we believe that's been achieved. If there's any future supply from Mr. Greenwood, then clearly we would take further action within the.
But just so we're clear, though,
have.
I mean, here's an individual who we've identified as selling an unlicensed product in the UK from a health food shop. You've given him a warning. That sounds as though that's the end of it, unless he does it again.
Well, within this case, I mean, as I say, our primary purpose is public safety, and that's been achieved by issuing him with a warning, which we.
But the campaigners, like Fiona O'Leary, say this is exactly the problem. You're not proactive, and even when you are alerted to problems, a little bit of a finger wagging. No further action taken.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I come into some of the wider things we do exactly in this space.
Well,
so,
I'm sure you'd like to do that. I'd like to ask you about the specific case, because it does sound as though here's somebody who we've identified doing something that is potentially illegal. You've issued a warning. As long as he doesn't do it again, that's the end of it.
Well, I mean, within GcMaf as an overall piece of work, I mean, last year we seized over 10,000 vials at a site in Cambridgeshire, and actually took those off of the market. And then if you look at some of the wider work that we do around fake medicines, there's an international concerted period of action that was initiated by us as a regulator, and that now occurs globally. Last year we seized over £13 million of unlicensed counterfeit and illegal medicines and medical devices, and thousands of websites we actually took down. So it's fundamental to what we do, and taking action in these cases is absolutely key.
OK, Mark Pearce, thank you from the MHRA. Just one little clarification as well. Thank you for the listeners who've been getting in touch with us about this. We said earlier that Police and Trading Standards in the UK investigated Amanda Mary Jewell for the supply of something called MMS, which she claimed could cure autism. MMS is not a sodium chloride, as we said, but it's actually sodium chloride solution. Either way, it is, as we said, a form of bleach. The time now is 13 to noon.